Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to kick off our third season of the podcast here at Hiring Matters. Tim Mitchell is our guest today. I'm very excited to have him join us from the Portland, Lake Oswego area up outside of Oregon, up in the great Northwest. And Tim and I have been colleagues for the last several years, and we finally were able to work the schedules out. So welcome to the show, Tim.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
How is the weather up in Portland today as we talk in late February?
Well, we're having a rare day of sunshine and 60-degree temperatures, so we're feeling very much like Southern Cal, more than Portland, Oregon in February. So everyone's in a great mood, and everyone's getting out there and really enjoying it. So and it's Friday, so.
Exactly right. All good stuff. Yeah. Anytime you have sunshine up there, it's a good day to be outside and enjoy it and kind of soak it all in, literally.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm very excited to jump into our conversation today. And I think you and I first started talking a few years ago when you were just about to exit Nike and had been there for a little over 19 years, if I recall, which is quite a while for, especially in these days, right, where people spend 5 years at a company and you think that they're a long timer, right? But 19 years at one organization is fantastic. And you had a lot of very exciting and different types of roles across those 19 years at Nike. So I'm excited to kind of delve into that and also talk about where you are today at Boost, where I know you've been there for a little over 3 years, and you've seen some great explosion of growth out there, and kind of trying to develop that new fan experience, coming at it from a technology perspective. So we're excited to jump into that also.
Same here. Let's go.
Yeah, very good, very good. So one of the things that we like to start off with is, because this is focused around, kind of the experience that we all have in a leadership capacity, and that encapsulates everything from hiring people and retaining them to how do you mentor, how do you manage, how do you lead them, multiple generations. There's all types of areas of focus out there, but also, different motivators for different people. So one of the things I like to kind of start with is, what I call kind of your do-overs. What are some things that you wish, with hindsight now, with the experience that you have today, sitting here in February of 2024, what are the things that you wish you could do over as a leader, as an employee, maybe earlier on in your career, or even more recently as a leader? What are those do-overs that come to mind for you?
I might have lost you there. I think I lost you on that one. That we had cut out. So maybe ask me again on the do-over.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Am I back?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, one of the things that we like to talk about on the show is in order to kind of make this a very, very organic, but also very accessible show, is to show kind of the vulnerabilities out there. And I know in my life, in my career, my experience, I have a fair number of what I call do-overs, right? Things that I would like to do differently, or if I had the wisdom then that I have today, then I would probably have shown up to a particular situation or scenario a little bit differently. So I'm curious, what comes to mind for you when I ask, what are the do-overs that you have in your professional career?
No, that's great. And I've listened to your podcasts and have heard that question before. So I gave that some thought. And actually, we connected probably around my 19-year mark, but my journey lasted 25 years. So, and in those 25 years, obviously, there's a lot of things that I could think about from a do-over perspective for sure. But I think working for a company the size of Nike, and then for folks out there that work with big companies, I mean, I think, what I really realized, and I realized this late in my Nike journey, was could I have and I think about this both from a leadership perspective as well as just as an individual contributor, but how could I push myself even further out of my comfort zone? Really, when it came to seizing everything that Nike had to offer. I think early on in my career, Nike was going through explosive growth in Europe in particular. And I really had an opportunity to work and live in kind of numerous countries as part of that expansion. And I think at the time it seemed a little daunting. And I was in a time of my life, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do this. But looking back now, particularly seeing how important it was to the company's long-term growth strategy of truly being a global powerhouse, taking on at that time the likes of Adidas and other folks who were much more established, especially in that part of the world. So pushing myself out of the comfort zone, maybe pursuing and going after opportunities to live and work in Europe, where the consumer really, where you really can learn the consumer. And I think I kind of realized that later in my career. I did, kind of double down in the North America marketplace. I developed skills there, stayed really tethered to the world headquarters offense and the operation there, and was able to really build up my career in the professional and collegiate sports environment that Nike was growing the business there. But later in my career, I did get the opportunity to work in from Portland, of course, but really immerse myself in both Europe and China, as well as just really get the opportunity to better understand the consumer there. Until you live there, until you travel there, until you really immerse yourself in those markets, you really can't understand that consumer mindset. And so I think, and I
Sure.
think that would have probably even helped me further in my career from a individual growth as well as from a leadership perspective, understanding, the nuances of all the different geographies and consumers across the world. So I think that would probably be ultimately I would have done that, earlier in my career and really made global experience, even to the point of relocation, a priority.
Interesting. Well, I find it fascinating that you're, and a bit humbling that you say that, you would have pushed yourself even further when there are a lot of folks out there that have, risen to different positions, never having left the comfort of North America or even the US or perhaps even just Portland, right? Or just their hometown. And they've gotten experience in different ways, but not in the same way that you have with, the ability to truly see, like you said, kind of be on the ground in those other countries with other consumers and other folks as well. Did you manage and or build a team when you were overseas, or did your leadership management journey kind of begin when you were here in the States?
All in the States. And I would have, throughout my career, I would have, direct reports and indirect reports the way a matrix organization would operate that would be based in other parts of the world. But I never physically lived or worked outside of the US. And so it took a lot of travel late in my career to really recognize the value of it and to really learn, especially with the growth that happened in the latter part of my Nike journey, just the power of the cultures and just really the understanding of what really made the consumer tick, how they followed sport. And, I was a big US sports fan, was not as in tune maybe with what the sport we call global football when I was at Nike. And, it's soccer in the US, it's global football everywhere else. I got a chance in my final chapter at Nike to really experience global football. And it was completely mind blowing to be able to immerse myself from Manchester to Barcelona to Paris and just see how those fans, we think US fans are passionate. When you actually get a chance to experience that and create product and experiences for that, but really immerse yourself on the ground there. It's there's no substitute. And all I could think to myself was like, why didn't I do this sooner? But yeah, never relocated there. And in hindsight, wish I would have done that.
Sure, sure. Well, I think it's a great testament to the power of getting outside your bubble, whether you're physically living there or traveling there as you did over those times. And I'm sorry that I lopped off 6 years of experience, so
No, that's
25,
all
not
right.
19 years. I want to give you full credit because that's even more impressive than 19 years was. But I mean, I think a lot of folks, I think a lot of leaders especially, would really benefit from being on the ground, even traveling, if you will, to where their customers, their consumers, and their team actually lives and breathes. And I think that's one of the opportunities that's kind of missed, I think, for a lot of leaders in the US is we have to do a lot of remote leading, remote mentoring and managing and development of staff without having always met them in person and gone out there, especially these days post COVID, where everything is virtual and virtual is a blessing and a curse depending upon, what kind of job you have. But I think, getting out there and seeing those folks really, I would imagine, probably helped you to better understand who your target audience was as a customer, as a consumer, but also what are those other employees of Nike like? How do they operate? How do they communicate? What's their style? What are their hiccups or their issues that they might have also that you can help with? So I think that's fantastic. When you began your career, did you have an ultimate goal of running teams and or rising to the level that you did in a more of a kind of a global merchandising event? You ran a business unit role also for a while. Did you have a specific path in mind when you first started?
Well, but pre Nike, sports was always my passion, and my degree was actually in journalism at the University of Illinois, and I grew up in the Chicago area in the Midwest. But from a life goals perspective, number one, when I was a college student graduating, I wanted to leave the cold winters of the Midwest and packed my car and headed out west to Southern California. And from there, it was I want to work in sports. Kind of evolved from the journalism perspective. I kind of saw where journalism was going in terms of I just felt like I wanted to be more on the business side of sport than reporting on it. So I pursued, landed with a sports PR firm on the West Coast in Southern Cal there, and between my work and finding the ultimate beach basketball court where I could play year round, it seemed like a great life. And along the way, working for sports PR, that evolved into sports marketing and events and products, and found my way to a Nike subsidiary where I really got my journey started there. So that was kind of the vision. Was it's always been about sports and kind of more of that fan side. I didn't realize that it would be such a constant throughout my career. But sports has always been a passion
Wow.
for me, and it's never been work. So
That's nice. Well, you're very fortunate in that regard. Not everybody can say that out there. That's for sure. Especially being in one sector for as long as you have. That's a great testament to the skill and the impact that you made, but also kind of knowing your passion, knowing your value, which is fantastic. So I'm curious. We talk a lot on this podcast about obviously around hiring and leadership, and there's a lot of discussion around what makes a good leader.
mhm.
And really good individual contributors, whether we're talking about sales or in the warehouse or in marketing or on the front lines of whatever that sector that company might do. A good individual contributor doesn't necessarily automatically make a good leader of other individual contributors, right? So I'm curious, at
It's
Nike,
cut out
was
again. I hope
there
it's not me.
a development program that that's okay?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yeah. No, I don't. I hope it's not me. I haven't had
Okay,
the
gotcha.
problems.
And yeah, as long as you can hear me, that's totally fine.
Okay.
And if the camera ends up, if I look at the video afterwards and it's not clear enough, we can always just have a still image of you while you're talking.
Okay.
We've done that before, so there's ways to fix that in editing. Luckily,
Got it.
yeah. As long as you can hear me, just go ahead and keep talking. We're good to
Okay.
go there.
Occasionally
Yeah, perfect.
you'll freeze, but I'll hang for a little bit.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. So let me go back to my question. One of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast around leadership is developing somebody from an individual contributor role where you're not leading a team into then that leadership capacity, and how people that are superstars in as an individual contributor don't always become superstars when they're managing and leading a team. It's a very different kind of a dynamic. You have to go from focusing on just yourself, whatever your particular domain is, to then focusing less on yourself and more on the people around you and bringing them up and helping them to be the absolute best in their roles. At Nike, was there any kind of a management development program that helped to prepare you for a leadership or management role?
There were several, and I think the way leadership development occurred at Nike, really the approach always was, they kind of had buckets or percentages of how much was kind of on you to really kind of develop yourself and your network, and then as you elevated through the organization, you had access to different programs. And huge company, we were going through massive rapid growth in my early years. And I recognized the importance of networking. And I also was very blessed to work in organizations that were headed up by what I'd call today the titans of Nike leadership. When you look through the history of Nike and its long history, I was working in organizations with some of the best leaders the company's ever had. And what I realized, they weren't exactly, they were pretty busy, right? I mean, they're running massive organizations, North America geography, global geographies, but they were also very accessible if you made an initial effort. And I was fortunate enough to have some great mentors, and really, in a lot of ways, Nike, matrix organization, heavy functionally driven organization, but there were roles, what we call general management roles, that kind of oversaw and kind of managed the matrix. Didn't have direct responsibility from a reporting process, but they indirectly were responsible for pulling all the different functions together: product, sales, marketing, et cetera, operations. And so I really kind of pursued some key mentors early on, and found them to be very amenable, and not only in kind of just, and again, this was like, meetings on Fridays, meetings in extra time, et cetera, that led to opportunities would open up, and those mentors would say, hey, we think Tim might be a good fit for that. So I think, a lot of ways, to answer your question, you know, at that time, the company's growing so quickly, and while they had kind of some programs in place, you're early on in your career, it was really upon you to kind of aggressively pursue those, of which I did, and I think got some really great experiences. Later on in my career, I did get access to some more elevated programs. There's a program called Accelerate, where your manager would nominate you, and you joined 30 or so other people from around the world, and you'd get, in addition to your day job, you would get assigned to a 6-month project, in which you would you work with folks from around the globe and come up with some future solutions for different initiatives. At that time, China growth was in play. And so we had several trips to China, and got access to the company's best leaders, and were assigned a project that at the end of the 6 months, we would pitch back to the Nike most senior leadership. So I think the company did a really good job, but early on, it really, career development, it was almost kind of like, sink or swim, right? Because I mean, at the growth and the pace of the company, and the expectations, right, of really not having your hand held, where Nike, it was really looking for people that could really, self-starters that could really find their way. So I think combination of great mentors, just really being hungry, and then later on getting access to some of these more structured leadership training programs played a big role for me.
Yeah, and I would imagine that the experience that you had with the mentors that were willing to, like you said, kind of talk to you after hours or on Fridays or weekends, whatever it was, to really kind of almost kind of take you under their wing and support you through your career. I would imagine that probably, to some extent, shaped how you then managed, how you led, and maybe you took it upon yourself to become a mentor and develop other folks. Any examples come to mind of people that you had on your team that you either inherited or that you brought on, that you really said, "Hey, I'm gonna make sure this person really flourishes and thrives in the Nike organization. I want to kind of really, support them and be their co-pilot, so to speak."
Yeah, no, I got that opportunity, and then certainly later in my career, based on the fact that I had so much experience and had seen so many iterations of the company. When I started, the company was just north of 5 billion. When I left, it was around 40. So I had seen so many iterations of the company, really going from powering up its wholesale offense to getting to a size where it had to kind of, it evolved to what they called the category offense, where the company got so big, it was getting kind of nibbled at by, category powerhouses, whether it was running, basketball, or lifestyle. So they broke the company up into smaller pieces and called the category offense. And then from there, direct to consumer became a major focus. So there was so many iterations and transformations of the company, and I got to experience all those and see, how people approach change, who was kind of wired for change, and who really was ready for that next kind of chapter. And for me, it was as again, it came down to just experience, right? The more I got exposed to different leadership styles, I always tried to take the the best pieces of each leader and their styles and so forth. And yes, I became very passionate about taking people under my wing. And toward that latter part of my career, I found myself getting assigned certain team members that either had high potential, or maybe some team members that maybe were maybe kind of stalled a little bit, but still there was the opportunity. So that was always a part of what I tried to bring to my leadership at the company. And I will say, as the company got bigger and bigger, that got harder and harder. And one of my biggest do-overs, in addition to what I shared as a leader, might have been how I, as the company got to a certain size, I had my team members were always coming to me like, help me with my career. How do I grow in this career? And as the company got bigger and more complex, that got more and more challenging, and really trying to, set expectations on advancement, particularly in certain functions where there wasn't a lot of advancement happening. It really became a more challenging. And I think that's for any company that grows to the size of 40, 50 billion, whatever. So, overall, I think from a mentorship perspective, again, I try to take not only from my mentors, but the various directors and managers I work with, the very best of each one, and try to stay on top of not just where the company was, but where it was going. We got to a point where there was a reorg seemingly every 36 months, and it was assigned to a new strategy. And so by the time you finally got your rhythm down and how you were running an offense, it was like, new leaders, new strategy, let's go. So, I think that's what's in a lot of ways prepared me for today, because, technology is changing by the hour. So, Nike's
Without
evolution.
question. Yeah, exactly.
So hopefully I answered that for you. But I think
That's great.
it's leadership, and we've talked about it. Leadership through complexity, leadership through all the different external forces. A company like Nike was a leader, and I always say for years and years and years, it was really equivalent to a team winning the championship year in and year out, every year winning that championship. And I think in recent years, new competitors have come in and are threatening to take that championship away. So how do you lead through that, and how do you keep people focused is something that I think just experience played a huge role.
That's great. Well, obviously you learned an awful lot and took a lot away from that experience over those 25 years. And to your point, having that focus, if you will, or strategy around offense. And I know most of us, I think, and probably most of my listeners, they know that I'm a big movie buff. I've seen the movie Air 5 times now, which I just love. It's just I'm sure it's not 100% accurate, but it's enough to give us a good sense for what it was like out there. But that approach to business and to customers and to the categories being focused around what's happening and being on the offense is it certainly rings true with that as well. So I want to remind
Air
our
5 times.
yes,
Oh,
yeah, I'm a big movie buff. Yeah, I've seen lots of movies multiple times, but that one in particular, I just really found it fascinating.
Yeah, that people have asked me about that, how realistic it was, and that I always tell people it's that predates me a little in terms of where Nike was at that time. But I think a lot of I was fortunate to work very closely with Howard White, who's depicted in the movie, one of the greatest human beings completely on the planet. I had very few interactions with Phil Knight, but I had a couple really incredible ones where I would say that I felt the movie in a lot of ways did not depict him accurately. Phil may have not been the most comfortable in conversation, but he was a brilliant man who he knew everything about what we were doing, and always had a challenging business kind of question about what we were doing. So, but overall, great movie. My era, where a lot of my career really took off was when I think about movies, I really kind of lean more towards the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan, as I got a chance to work very closely with the Bulls and those athletes. But Air was, I thought they did a really nice job. I never would have thought when I started with the company years
Yeah.
ago that there would be a movie called Air how many years later. So it's a great movie.
Yeah. Well, I think the movie Air combined with Shoe Dog, the book,
Yeah.
is probably a good primer to what it was like out there.
Shoe
And I want
Dog.
to remind our listeners also that we're talking to Tim Mitchell today. We're very fortunate to have him join us. He spent 25 years at Nike. He's now working as the chief commercial officer at Boost, still up in the Northwest, up in Portland. So I want to fast forward if we can. So all the things that you learned and took away from your experience at Nike with living domestically but working kind of globally as you described earlier, how does that shape that move, right? For a short time in between where you are now at Boost and after you left Nike, you were doing a little consulting on your own, right, with your business called Next Flight. But going from an 80,000 employee company like Nike to where you are today where there's 25 employees, that's a little bit of a different dynamic, to say the least, right? But I know you and I have spoken several times over the last year plus about what you call kind of your culture playbook and how you've built the team, how you've engaged, and how you've mentored the team that you now have, because you're running 1,000 miles an hour in this startup. Can you talk about what Boost does and your role out there?
No, absolutely. Love to. And I think to kind of lead into that, I also was thinking about a do again from your previous sessions, and I think my do again really kind of set the tone for my latest chapter here with Boost and sports technology. And I think while I talked about my do over at Nike and really immersing myself more in the global aspect of the business. With that said, my career path at Nike was a what I'd call very non-traditional. And what I mean by that is, at Nike, especially during the explosive growth from the 5 billion on, individuals grew up, so to speak, through various functions, product, sales, marketing, and they would just elevate through the organization, develop this incredible functional excellence. And a lot of folks were really going after the highest profile, most coveted businesses, footwear, and things like that. But what I watched that happening. And again, part of this was back to the mentorship that I got. I saw a lot of those people elevate quickly through the organization, and then the next day they were gone. And when they were gone, even post Nike, they found it challenging to kind of like continue on in their careers because in a lot of ways there was a perception that all they really knew was Nike. So I kind of watched that happening. And again, from my general management mentorship I was receiving, I saw value in it. This is a really large company, and there are so many areas that I can work. So instead of rather staying in one functional path, I really inspired by these folks that were giving me guidance. I really looked and I thought to myself, okay, so joined the company from a subsidiary based in Southern California, down there in Irvine. Would come up to Nike every 6 weeks for meetings. My job at that time was to really for the subsidiary was to leverage the very best of Nike, and it was across everything from advertising credits to, hey, you can use these athletes in your marketing because we're written in their contracts, to, hey, here are some sales partners that you can draft off our presentations with and interact with us. We were an extension brand of Nike at that time. And so I got to learn the company across multiple functions, and I found myself liking it all. So I kind of took that early approach and eventually landed a role full time up in Beaverton. Was moved up there from Southern California, and from there worked in retail marketing to start, but then was pulled into a growing business in licensing around emerging products. Nike was starting to get into products beyond footwear and apparel, and products where they didn't have number 1, 2, or even number 5 market share. And so I got exposed to not only new products, but just it was much more entrepreneurial than the behemoth businesses in footwear and apparel. So along the way, I really understood what it was like to grow a business, a small business from scratch. Of course, with the backdrop and the comfort of a giant global organization and its funding, but learned so much in that regard. And then from there, was pulled back into apparel. to manage our professional and collegiate apparel businesses and licensing agreements. So I got a real chance to kind of work across the matrix rather than up one particular function. And again, it aligned with some of the early guidance I got and mentorship I got in terms of the value of really, by the end of my career, I could walk into what we'd call an integrated marketing meeting, and I could look around the table and I could know every single person at the table, what was driving them, what was driving product, what was driving sales, what was driving marketing, and most importantly, how could I create synergies across? Because product would have an amazing idea, and sales would be like, "There's no way we're ever going to be able to sell it at that price," or marketing would say, "There's not a compelling enough story," and so I got it, through my career, I got to see and learn what drove, inspired every function, and felt really blessed to have that type of experience. And again, it was not many people have had that type of career at Nike or any. I
I
don't know
agree.
about any big company that is so
Yeah.
functionally driven. But along the way, though, perhaps the most important thing about that is the people I was able to go into battle with, and that was really my fuel. And I think Nike's known for its athletes, of course, advertising, amazing iconic products, but I think the people I went into battle with really became the difference. And my long-winded kind of entree into what got me to Boost was when I discovered Boost. After my Nike journey, what really kind of caught me was the folks, the founder, and some of the key kind of co-founders, if you will, had a lot of the same spirit and energy of my early Nike days. And I think that people aspect, you're going to do a lot of hard work in your career. You're going to have your highs and lows, but it always, to me, it's going to come back to the people. And when I discovered the Boost folks, I said, this is something I really want to be a part of.
Well, and I love how you talked about the need and the ability that you had, that you developed over years, to be able to read the room and know who was in the room, and that would then, based on their title, kind of their role, why they were there, that would, I assume, as you said, kind of dictate, what was important to them, what were their hot buttons, what did they want to accomplish, what were they being held accountable to, right? And it probably allowed you to kind of speak in various, quote unquote, business languages to make sure you were hitting on all of those. And I think a lot of folks miss that. A lot of leaders out there end up, especially in larger companies, it's even much more pronounced. In larger companies, you become so siloed, where you might be in merchandising or just sales or marketing or even a piece of any of those, and you live and breathe that, but you rarely get a chance to see what happens outside of that particular bubble that you're charged with. And for your ability to work across all those different areas, different business unit lines, different areas of the organization, different offenses, as you talked about before, that's fantastic. I mean, that's a great way to develop, if you will, your leadership skills. So how do you then deploy that today with a team of, like I said, 25 people? But how do you then manage to speak to all the different internal stakeholders to make sure that you're all kind of rowing in the same direction, as they say?
Right. No, and I think that's a great question, and something that I gave a lot of thought to when I left Nike and kind of was starting the consulting thing before I was introduced to the Boost team. I got a lot of really good advice in terms of folks are like, you got great experience at Nike, but remember, there's only one Nike out there. And as you go out and try to interface with other companies, other opportunities, be careful not to say, well, when I was at Nike, we did this, that, and the other thing, and we should try to do that here. I really tried to kind of step back a little bit and just say, okay, what did I learn that is truly translatable, whether it's, would you say 80,000 to 25? And so I took a lot of time doing that, talked to a lot of people who had gone out, worked for smaller companies and listened to them. And that's the one cool thing about working at a company like that. There's a network of folks that you stay connected with forever, and you can tap into each other and share.
Sure.
And what I really realized, it really kind of dawned on me too, when I, post the Nike chapter, I was on a golf trip with some VC guys who were investing in tech companies that were focusing on sports technology. And as they learned about my Nike experience, before I was really even thinking about it, they were like, man, I think we have a lot of emerging companies out there that have great potential. They have amazing technology, but they don't really, maybe they don't have the type of relationships and knowledge you have of the pro and college sports space, or strategic planning, things I took for granted at Nike, operational excellence, even running an organization in terms of, talent planning, goaling, evaluating, et cetera. So, just talking to a lot of people that kind of, shine the light back on me, like, didn't even realize it maybe at the scope. And I always say this, I looking back at my career, I have nothing but love for Nike, and always will. But I will say that, and again, it's part of any big organization, especially Nike with there is no finish line. Since I've left, I probably have really recognized the value of my experience, maybe even more so when I was there, or was even recognized by the organization. So I think taking all the best aspects of the company, Nike at one time, before it was 40, 45 billion, whatever it is today, was a startup, right? And was a small company. And I think you hit on Shoe Dog and the growth of the company, the way Phil grew it, and huge emphasis on people, and the way he was able to mesh, maybe on the surface, not people you would think are going to be high performers, but he had just such a knack for discovering and meshing the talent. And I think that's what we've tried to do at Boost. So try to put some structure in place, not too much. We mentioned the culture playbook. As we were forming the company, our founder, Mustafa Abdul Hamid, just a brilliant guy, who's his journey started in sports, and he started this company after playing college ball down your way at UCLA with folks like Russell Westbrook and Kevin Love and Drew Holiday. Went to a couple Final Fours. Our founder Mustafa went on to play professionally in Europe before coming back to the U.S. and getting his master's at Stanford, and having just this vision for, how does he parlay his sports experience into future business, and power athletes through technology. And his mindset about building a culture, it starts there, I think. And then what attracted me to Boost is just putting together a team of individuals who have functional passion, sports passion, but really he has a real knack for prioritizing, kind of that team chemistry aspect. And as I've come on, he's asked me to take on a lot of the culture responsibilities. He's kind of set the tone for what he'd like to see from a culture perspective. But my first order of business when we were building our culture playbook was personally interviewed every single member of the team, did a one-on-one, and so we've got a blank canvas here, we've got a blank playbook. Help us build it. What do you want to see in the company? And some people were really, at first were really, they were hesitant, like, what, you really want my, my opinion? And they weren't really sure what to say. While others,
Yeah, what's the right answer? What do they want me to say here? Yeah,
right,
they want to tell you what they think you want to hear. Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
And others were just like, I filled up notebooks of knowledge. So, and together we put together this culture playbook. We also referenced some other, companies in the industry, and in technology, and consumer industry, and others where we thought they had a really good handle on things. But what we also did with this culture playbook, and it's got all of our, the principles, and it's got all of our, it's got all the everything from our principles to, holidays and all that other thing. And but we also made it accessible that employees can add their comments along the way. Think of a Google Doc with added capabilities,
Okay.
right?
Kind of a working live document. Interesting. Okay,
Yeah,
you don't see that very often when it comes to employee handbooks, if you will, or playbooks. Yeah.
and again, there are certain things from and you know this better than anybody, from HR regulations, legal, all that other stuff that you have to abide by. But we wanted everybody's input, and so it was an amazing experience. Also, what I also recognized is we're trying to really build our business in a very high-powered, competitive, and constantly changing business is that you can have great innovation, great technologies, especially in the era today of AI, when everybody's like, "What's the role of the human?" But what really set it apart was like, we have to tell the stories of our amazing teammates, because we do really think that's what sets us apart. And we've launched a series of what we're calling boost scouting reports, where we highlight, I think I shared the link with you, where we highlight our employees and do a profile or two a month. And what we really found was super technical expertise, but also whether it's his passion for sport or something else, or someone that's overcome adversity or had an amazing journey in life. All those factors that you would use when you're talking about going through the hiring process. I think what we've really tried to shine the light on our people, give them say in the future of the organization, highlight them, recognize them, and share that with prospects, customers, the industry. And I think that's played a big role. And I think another thing that we've done is, and I take this from your book, your big section on transparency, right? And I was amazed at, and maybe this is more common in smaller companies, but having come from a behemoth global organization, I was amazed at the level of transparency that Mustafa really wanted to have with our employees. And all I did really, I think, from there is like maybe more formalized things like communication. We don't need more meetings, but if we are having meetings, let's make sure that they're consistent. Let's make sure that we're reporting on a consistent level. Let's also make sure we have an opportunity for all of our employees to present and share what they're doing. So, just putting a little bit more structure around things. But that whole area around transparency that you highlighted was something that, and again, people today with, I think the culture, especially the new workforce, there's so much more visibility to everything. I think another thing you referenced in your book, but we see this where there's so much more visibility of what's happening in people's personal lives, what's happening within a company. So I think transparency is kind of more expected these days, but it's such a huge part of putting together, particularly a remote organization like we have.
Oh, that's great. I love that, and I think that's it's a lot of earlier stage companies, small or either small companies that are startup or even more mature companies that are kind of mid-sized. I think a lot of them forget about that importance around transparency, and maybe you as a leader are not changing how you lead as fast as you should to adapt to what the new workforce, what the Gen Zers are expecting out there. That transparency is kind of what they've grown up with, is what they expect. They don't know any different. And so we as leaders have to make a change. So at the risk of using yet another sports analogy, one of the things that comes to mind for me looking at Nike versus where you are now at Boost is the pace of play, right? How fast things happen, how fast decisions get made, or how slowly they get made, who's involved, right? How nimble are you? So now that you're in this, this startup, fast-paced, technology forward company that's focused around, improving, enhancing the fan experience at Boost, how do you hire for that? How do you determine in an interview process, right, or even in the first 90 days of someone coming on board, that how do you know that they're prepared for that sprint, right? Like a basketball game, or in some cases they have to be more kind of like a baseball game where it's a lot of strategy, a lot of data, a lot of analytics. So much information goes into every decision that you see made on the diamond, on the baseball field out there. Whereas, sometimes it's just like go, 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 go. Okay, pivot, go, 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 pivot again.
Yeah.
How do you hire for that? How do you discern whether a new employee is going to be, the right fit for that kind of environment?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you think about the comparison, and I know for me personally, when I joined Boost, I was so schooled and trained to kind of get buy-in on various ideas and insights, and work it up the ladder before ultimately presenting it to senior leadership. And with Mustafa and our leadership team, it's like we'll be on a call and I'll be like, well, I have I have an initiative, but I really want to kind of vet it. He's like, no, share it now, and don't. And it took me a while to kind of like, I was so skilled and trained to do that. But when it comes to hiring, I think, and I had a great conversation with our chief technology officer yesterday, Inga Nachmanson, and really who's done a lot of hiring in the last 90 days. She's actually based down your way. I think I've actually introduced her to you. But we were talking through that and that very question, like and ultimately you're looking for experience. Especially a company like that's our size and needs to grow quickly, and really, it's hard to bring someone in with very little experience and throw them into the fire, and expect them to, to your point, kind of engage and initiate at a high level immediately. But experience doesn't necessarily mean a 20-year veteran or anything like that. Look at people that, internships, side hustles, whatever, where they're just constantly, toggling between, different things. And it starts with passion. A guy like Christian Hanish on our team, who, while he was going to school, was working not with just one but two different college basketball programs in kind of whether it was a managerial or a data analytics function, totally on his own dime. And while he was doing that, he started an app for finding the best pickup basketball games around Southern California, to where he's doing internships and ultimately working for Boost, or folks that we've discovered through that had gotten maybe a year or two with a big company, found they wanted to be in sports, took on an internship or a grad school program, and was doing three other things. So I think people that are able to, we look at, kind of not only the years of experience, but the varieties of experience, and just, you can kind of discern a lot from someone that's just really hungry and just passionate. And we've been able to really find and uncover some amazing talents. And at the end of the day, I think it's, to your point, it is hard. There's a lot of talented people out there, but what's going to be the right fit? What's going to really create the best chemistry for us? And we've been fortunate in that regard. But I credit a lot to our leadership team. I talked about Mustafa. I talked about Inga. I talked about Jorge Costa, who created one of the first versions of NBA analytics before moving on to the Detroit Pistons. Nate Schneider, who came from the Big Ten Conference, who's one of our partners. All these folks, have a tremendous experience and a good eye for, building teams. And I could go on for hours and how they do that, but I think it starts with our leadership team for sure. Jessica Dosh, with history working in enterprise sales, with big, the Microsofts and folks like that. So we've been able to put together an amazing leadership team that I think is no egos. Nobody's better than the other person, and just, putting together and being able to mesh at that level. And I think it makes it so much easier. It's almost a snowball effect in terms of as we bring on new talent and what we're looking for.
I'm curious about, I want to switch gears just slightly, because I know a big change has taken place in the college sports world with, the new laws around folks that are in the NCAA, right, that are now able to earn money off of their likeness, right? I think it's NIL, right, is name, image, and likeness. Is that correct?
Name, image, likeness.
Okay. Yeah, great. I would imagine a lot of these athletes that maybe have, let's say they're halfway through their college career and they weren't able to, earn anything off of their image or likeness, and now all of a sudden they are. I would imagine that just creates a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of these athletes thinking, oh my gosh, how do I manage that? What do I do? Do I get an agent? Do I not? I know that you guys don't serve as agents per se, but do you find yourself back in a bit of a mentorship role or leadership role, trying to help some of these athletes just navigate this whole brand new world out there?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like, name, image, likeness is just one piece of, we've seen more change in the college landscape in the last 36 months than probably the last, 36 years. And you talk about name, image, likeness. You talk about conference realignment. You see all these, out here on the West Coast, all of my Oregon friends, University of Oregon friends, and they're so excited to be going to the Big Ten. And I'm like, wait till they have to travel to Champaign, Illinois. But
Careful what you ask for,
yeah,
right? What you wish for.
but that combined with the transfer portal, where if you're a coach, you're basically going to have 3 to 5 new team members every single year, and that's not including the incoming freshmen. So much has happened there, and you got to remember, especially in the college space, these colleges, they're not Fortune 500 companies. They're academic institutions, and they are staffed, especially in athletics, they're staffed to create schedules, to maintain facilities, to provide housing and accommodations for students and field teams and travel and do a lot of things. They don't have time for the latest technology. They're not skilled in marketing, although some do a pretty good job, I would say. So with that in itself, but as it becomes such a big business, these media deals, data deals in the billions, right, is so much. So I think, again, back to me kind of heaping praise on our leadership team. Having folks from enterprise, having folks that have worked in the NBA, having folks like Mustafa who played the game at a high level. I was a walk-on at University of Illinois basketball, so I got a little exposure to what big time athletics was many years ago. But having all that levels of experience, along with my time at Nike, where I interfaced with the colleges directly, we have a lot of experience in the space and can kind of help coach. Maybe not so much the athletes, although we have had, we do know folks that are actually playing the game today, but really more the schools. Like, hey, here's based on all of our collective knowledge, here's how I think you need to manage through that. And it's been fascinating. And our kind of our sales pitch, our opening statement is the economics of sports are rapidly changing, and we future proof your org for the next media deal, landmark legislation, or seismic industry shift. And if you talk to these schools, every day they're waking up to something new in front office sports or sporting business daily about this just happened. Oh my God, like it's going to turn the whole industry on its ears. So it's crazy right now in college sports. But I think our collective experiences as a leadership team really has helped us kind of be able to frame things up. Okay, here's the problem. What are the solutions?
Interesting. Yeah, there is. I mean, like you said, the seismic forces that are out there, some of which maybe you can kind of predict, but many of which you think, wow, who knows what's going to happen? It could change on a dime yet again. Back to that whole point about, it being a sprint and having to pivot as well.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the folks you have on your team right now that are the more junior folks, not the executive leadership team that you referenced before, but the more junior folks, I'm curious, do they expect any type of career pathing? One of the things that we talk about a lot in the recruiting world is somebody, especially a younger professional, if you will, coming into a company, and they want to know, okay, so what's the long-term opportunity? How can what's the potential pathway for me? And it's easier in a company like Nike when you have so many different departments and regions and countries that you could potentially work for. But I have 8 folks in my company. You have 25. It's a little more challenging to provide that. So how do you address that? How do you respond to those kinds of questions?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great kind of thought to ponder. I think they absolutely are focused on growing their careers, and they have. I think it's amazing. They have such confidence in themselves that hey, I will grow, and I should grow at a certain rate. And yes, when you're a company of 25, I even spoke to my final chapter at Nike's. We got so big, it actually got a little more challenging because there were so many employees vying for any positions that if a position opened up, there'd be so many folks applying for that one or two or five positions that, so whether it's you're really small or really large, the expectations and the pace of growth it can be challenging. I think what I've seen at Boost is where we've been able to inspire even our younger team members is one, and you'll read it in some of the profiles. The team members do speak to the ability, like, I came in and I got the keys to so much more than I expected, and maybe they work for a bigger company and were kind of put in their box, so to speak. But since they've come into Boost, they're like, wow, I was shocked out of the gate how much responsibility I was given and how much I was encouraged to go beyond that. So I think, and again, it comes back to, kind of part of that is due to our size. We kind of have to do that, I mean, we've only got so many people, but we also have a lot of confidence in folks, not to, we feel good about the calculated risks of handing our team members the keys to really building something much bigger than they thought. And then with the pace of technology, we're launching a whole new platform in the next quarter around so much of what we've been working on is automated content, websites, and other areas of fan engagement where we can really kind of supercharge fan engagement through automated content. But now we're going to be launching a whole new module around fan data. So, we kind of call it this unify fan data and engage them through a number of channels. And so with the pace of technology and as we work with our customer base and we're learning what problems they need to solve, we're now giving our team members the opportunity to expand their skill sets and to work on new things. Back to my Nike example, it might have been you're in apparel and that's what you're doing. But think if you were like, hey, while you're doing this apparel thing, we're going to expand now to accessories and wearable technology, kind of thing. So I think that's kind of the analogy I'd give. But it's important just to empower and give them the exposure and experiences. And if they choose to find an opportunity beyond Boost based on the skills they got, then we're obviously doing something right. We don't want them to leave. We absolutely want them to stay. But there is absolutely a premium, and that was one thing I will say that we were able to do as an extension of our culture playbook is implement a kind of a goaling and a career development process where making sure our key leaders are meeting with setting goals every year, doing quarterly check-ins, along with doubling down on, okay, what do you want to do next? So kind of more formalizing that process. I think for some companies that's kind of a very it happens when it happens when you're growing so fast. You're like, oh yeah, we'll get to that kind of thing. So we did implement that as well as an extension of our culture playbook. But yeah, absolutely important. And I think again with the pace of technology and the solutions that we're unlocking or the problems that need to be solved, it's opening up new opportunities for people to even our youngest team members to really expand their skill sets.
That's great to hear. Yeah, we call that kind of those career conversations, right? Gone are the days where you just have I'm sure probably Nike did this as many big companies do, but gone are the days where you have one performance review once a year and you sit down with your manager or your director, whoever it might be, and you try to remember, okay, what happened over the last 12 months?
Oh, yeah.
What can I speak to? And nobody likes it. The actual employee or the leader, the manager, no one likes that. It's not a very productive dynamic or conversation. But instead, if you have like what you're talking about, we call again career conversations, where it's not going to be once a year, but it's also not going to be every single week. It's every quarter ideally, where you're sitting down and saying, what are your goals? What are you looking to get out of this role? How can I better support you? What are some other areas that you might want to get some exposure to, like you said, based on maybe special projects coming up or new initiatives or what have you? But having that ongoing dialogue, that is A, the most effective, and B, the most kind of cost effective, if you will, the cheapest way to keep good people is to simply engage with them, have a conversation. Back to the whole idea of transparency. that's what people want these days, is to know that A, what I'm doing is making a difference, having an impact on the overall business, no matter how big the company is. And B, how can I do more? How can I provide more? Am I doing my job well? Great, I am. What's next? And how can I contribute in other areas? So I'm really happy to hear that a company your size is already thinking about that and incorporating that into your culture playbook. I have one more question for you, but before that, I want to make sure that our listeners have a chance to contact you if they have questions about what you're doing at Boost, about other ideas or takeaways from your days at Nike. What's the best way for our audience to contact you, Tim?
Well, we'd love you to follow us on LinkedIn, Boost Sport AI. But a simple email for me is Tim at Boost Sport AI. So, I'm sorry, Tim Boost. Let's start that one again.
Sure,
I
sure.
was going there.
That's okay.
I don't even know my email address.
You
So,
don't email yourself very
yeah,
often,
yeah.
right?
So hold tight here.
Sure, sure. I
It's
can I can ask the question again
yeah,
too.
yeah. That'd be great. Yeah, because
Okay,
we're
sure.
I didn't have too many restarts, so
No, it's perfect.
hopefully
That was
that
very
was
good.
good. I love this. So yeah. So it's
You got
yeah.
it.
Okay. Cool.
Okay,
Start
I'll
again.
ask a question again. Sure. Tim, I have one final question I
Mhm.
want to ask, but before that, I want to make sure that our audience has the ability to get a hold of you to ask questions about what's happening at Boost, what you're doing, what's coming up down the pike, and maybe even just kind of pick your brain a little bit about what you learned at Nike. What's the best way for folks to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think best way is simple email address Tim at boostsport.ai. That's boostsport.ai. Best way to get a hold of me, and certainly follow us on LinkedIn on Boost Sport AI on LinkedIn, and we'd love to have you follow us. But email is probably the best.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. I'm sure you'll probably get some of our listeners kind of tapping into your knowledge base. So thank you for making yourself available. Hey, so my last question is around. It's a bit nebulous, but I'll try to make it a little more concise. There are a lot of things that I've experienced over my 27 years of recruiting, where there are certain skills that seem to be very not only transferable but very very universal. And I talk about it in my book also. And for me, it's perseverance and resilience, right? The ability to push through difficult times, the ability to bounce back from difficult times, which kind of defines perseverance and resilience. Are there any kind of universal or common skills or traits that you and your team look for when you're hiring people that really has proven to be an indicator of someone's work ethic and performance ability?
Yeah, I think I certainly I think the perseverance and overcoming adversity. I think we all encounter that, and certainly learning about those situations, I think is very helpful because you and I have talked about a post-pandemic world. Zoom? Are we Zoom? Are we hybrid? Are we back in the office? What's happening geopolitically? What's happening with the global economy? I mean, it's just piling on these days. So we certainly look for that and try to unlock that. I think the three words that come to mind when you ask that question is passion, vision, and connection. And what I mean by that is obviously passion. You don't necessarily have to be passionate about sports, although sure makes it easier when you're QAing content at 3 in the morning for for the next morning or whatever. But passion in whether it's sport or you have passion for a function that you do, or even in your life, as we kind of meet potential candidates and they share passion's huge, and I think that's something that I've tried to embody, and that we look for. Vision is just and we find this a lot when we're talking to people, whether it's someone we're interviewing or someone that's on our team and we're writing a profile about them. They even become, as they're sharing that, they even become kind of surprised what kind of vision they have for themselves, whether it's in their career or their life. Whether it's leaving their country and coming to the United States with nobody, no family, no friends, but they knew that for their life to really take off, they needed to do that. Or some of the other folks I talked about who do about 55 things along with their day job because they have a vision for their life. And then finally, the connection piece. Certainly a lot of candidates, that we've brought on board, we knew in an earlier life. But then we've also discovered that we might have crossed paths and stayed connected with them, and didn't necessarily think about them for our business, but they ended up, working for us. So I think when it comes down to it, passion, vision, and connection is super critical. And, in a fully remote offense like we have, connection is really important, right? And how do you and I had some of our conversations, I think it was about a year ago, like how are you keeping people connected when they're not all in the same room? So those three come to mind. I would always start with perseverance and overcoming adversity, but I think those are foundations, and all of us, we've all had to be that way. But those are the three
Yes,
that I
yes.
would say.
That's great. No, I love the way you encapsulated those three things into, and it permeates a lot of what everybody does, whether you have the passion for the sport, like you said, or a passion for data, or a passion for working with a great team, or a passion for startups. I mean, there's different ways to define that, but that passion, that vision around what do you want to do, where do you see yourself going, and then having those connections as well to that you're starting to build, or maybe if you're more of a seasoned employee, then you already have those connections built out and you know how to leverage those. So those three, I think, go very, very well together for sure. Well, thank you, Tim. It's been a great conversation today. I'm so glad you're able to join us. I know we're on the cusp of March Madness breaking out here very, very soon. So there'll be a lot of exciting things going on very, very soon in your world for sure. And thank you all to our audience also. As a reminder, it's Hiring Matters. And we would love for you to talk about what we do and who we interview here with your friends. Follow us, give us a rating, or everywhere you can possibly imagine in terms of podcast platforms. And we always have amazing guests like Tim who are willing to kind of be vulnerable and share their experience, their insights, and be able to provide us, the audience, really, and myself as well, with some great takeaways to bring back to our organizations and deploy right away. So thank you, Tim, for sharing that with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I was really looking forward to it, and love all your podcasts. So keep them coming.